Oh, welcome to the Yawa blog. We're here in the Rainbow Studio. We're going to return to our presentation of Appalling Twistianity. We're going to take a little different approach on this morning's program, and that I'm going to refute Paul by quoting God. How about that? The first citation will be from the 19th Mizmor, known to many of you as a psalm. It reads as follows: Yahweh's Torah, which would be teaching, instruction, guidance, and directions, is complete, lacking nothing, helpful, healing, beneficial, and true, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. Yahweh's testimony is trustworthy and reliable, making understanding and obtaining wisdom simple for the open minded. Mizmor Song, Psalm 19:7. Pretty hard to argue with that. If you have one citation, and we have many, many, many of them, that is clearly from God, that is in a book filled with prophecy and proof that it was inspired by God, and it contradicts what men claiming to speak for God said, those men claiming to speak for God lied. And that is the reason we're considering this, because Paul called the Torah pornography. He said that the purpose of his imaginary Jesus Christ was to rip us away from the terrible treatment we were receiving under the Torah and to replace that old, terrible, uh, abusive system with his new gospel of grace. It was all pathetic. It was a disgusting lie. And this is just one of many statements that prove it. Let me read that again. Yahweh's Torah, his guidance and teaching, is complete, lacking nothing, helpful, healing, beneficial, and true, returning, restoring, and transforming the soul. By the way, that's all you ought to care about. Your body is meaningless, it's disposable, but not your soul. That's the reason why the whole Christian idea of their God being a man is so absurd, of men killing God and of the solution being bodily resurrected. I mean, it's three strikes of the stupid stick. Your body is meaningless. You can't get off this planet with a body. Oh, you can go visit the moon for a few days, but that's about it. You're never going anywhere with a body. God does not have a body. The body of God wasn't killed. The body of God wasn't resurrected. It's absurd. It's all about the soul. And your soul is either transformed such that it's enveloped with light energy, replacing your physical body, such that you can enter God's presence and leave the confines of 3D and enter the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions, or you're just simply going to die. Your soul will dissipate into nothing and your body will rot. Those are your choices. And therefore, Yahweh's testimony is trustworthy and reliable, making understanding and obtaining wisdom simple for the open minded. Now, the following proverb, this same Torah, is called Tob, good. And that means, according to God, the good news and his Torah are synonymous. And that would make Paul's claims preposterous. Consistently listen, children, to the correct and disciplined instruction, Mutsar, of the Father, Ab, and pay attention so as to know and appreciate, Yada, understanding and discernment, making the proper connections to comprehend. For indeed, such teaching and learning, instruction and direction are good, they're beneficial and helpful. For this reason, I have given you my Torah. You should not forsake, neglect, or reject it. Al-Azab, Mashal, word pictures, Proverbs 4, 1 and 2. That's it, folks. You can't plaster a New Testament on top of what you're calling an Old Testament when your New Testament contradicts and condemns everything that came before? You want to create a God-forsaken religion? Be my guest. I don't care. But if your God-forsaken piece of crap religion is going to claim the inspiration of the God that it contradicts, then I've got a dog in that fight. And I'm disgusted by the likes of Peter and Paul, Luke and Mark, and all the nonsense that they proposed that is so reprehensible, and all of the souls that have been led astray by this trash. I mean, think about what God just said here. The Mashal, the Proverbs are inspired. Consistently listen, children, to the correct and disciplining instructions of the Father, and pay attention so as to know and appreciate, to yada, understand, coming to comprehension by making the proper connections, bena. For indeed, such teaching and learning, instruction and direction, lakach, are good, they're beneficial, they're helpful, tob, proper, prosperous, favorable, pleasing, enjoyable, valuable, and healing. For this reason, I have given you my Torah, my teaching, my guidance, my instruction, and my directions. You should not forsake, neglect, or reject it. But Paul's first sentence in his first letter, the very first sentence written in Christianity, says that the whole purpose of his imaginary Iusu Christou, Jesus Christ, was to tear you away from the Torah. And God says, don't ever forsake it. Don't ever neglect it. Don't ever reject it. Somebody was lying. Who do you suppose was lying? Yahweh or Paul? Tough call, huh? So why are there 2.5 billion Christians who believe that Paul was telling the truth and that God was lying? David's magnificent 119th Psalm is a composition of inspiring and beautiful lyrics. It is an ode to the Torah with 22 stanzas presented in alphabetical order, celebrating the letters which comprise Yahweh's guidance. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, 17 consonants and 5 vowels. David wrote the 119th Psalm to present the merits of the Torah in alphabetical order, beginning with Aleph and then Be'eth, and going all the way through the Hebrew alphabet, all 22 letters in alphabetical order, so that we might understand the Torah. He wrote, "You have actively engaged and accomplished good, beneficial, and generous things, which with and through your associate and co-worker." Oh, then who would be Yahweh's associate and co-worker? Couldn't be Jesus, could it? Because guess who wrote this? Dode. So the great things, the good, beneficial things that God enabled were with and in association with his co-worker. So you have actually and actively engaged and accomplished good, beneficial, and generous things, that which is productive, with and through your associate and co-worker, Yahweh, in accordance with your word. By the way, the word of God at the time was comprised of the Torah. There may well have been available to him the book of Shaphat, Judges, and likely the recordings of Yosha ben Nun. And he was receiving the updates that are now presented and lived his life in the midst of what is now recorded in the books of Shamuel. But that was it. That was the word of God. And the word of God, the centerpiece of it, is the Torah. The good and positive aspects associated with exercising good judgment, The whole process of informed and rational decision making, tamam, leading to understanding based upon the knowledge, diath, teaches me so that I will benefit by choosing to respond appropriately. Tob is good, that which is positive, productive, beneficial, healing, beautiful, agreeable, pleasing. Good judgment as a result of informed, rational decision making is from Tamam. Understanding, imperial knowledge is based upon Diath. Have you ever heard that word before?
Yep.
Yeah, Diath. Diath is introduced to us in the Torah in conjunction with one of the two trees. It is the Etz Diath. It's the tree of knowledge. And Diath is represented to us as one of the seven spirits of the Choter. The Choter is also presented as a tree. It's the limb of a tree is what Choter means, and it's described as an observant branch, a netzar. We are told that its roots are deeply established and that it is fruitful and productive. And the etzah, the tree providing comprehensive counsel of Diath, are two of the seven spirits afforded the Choter. And so Dode is expressing here what he has learned from that very tree of knowledge. Teaches me so that I will benefit by choosing to respond appropriately. Dode is crediting the tree of knowledge for his growth from really a horrible and desperate position that was sex and wine fueled at the low point of his life, but recovered as a result of the intervention in his life by the tree of knowledge. Indeed, in the terms and conditions of your covenant agreement, your mitzvah, I completely trust and totally rely because they are verifiable and enduring. This was Mizmor Psalm 119:65. I was the first to actually detail and enumerate the 5 conditions of the covenant. There are 5. And there are 5 benefits of the covenant. Not surprisingly, 5 is the number of fingers on our hand, and not surprisingly, that there are 5 hands in Yahweh's name. So let's go through them. The first condition of the covenant is that we disassociate from religion and politics. The condition is to walk away from Babel, from the family of man, from the culture of civilizations. Babylon was the birthplace of the integration of religion and politics to control and fleece people. And as a result, God says, for us to be involved in a relationship together, the very first thing you must do is walk away from Babel. This commingling, that's what Babel means, commingling of truth and lies, of religion and politics, all designed to confuse. You'll note that Yahweh did not address Abram at the time, or Sarah, prior to them leaving Babel. And the same thing is true for the rest of us. God is not going to reach out to you, introduce himself to you, or commence a relationship with you, choose to be with you until you first reject religion. Look at Moshe. Where was he? He was raised in the most religious and political culture of the day, in Mitzrayim, in Egypt. He rejected it. He stood up against it, and he left it. And it was all the way around the base of Mount Choreb in Arabia, all the way across the Sinai, away from Egypt, that Yahweh introduced himself to Moshe. And he could not have done so until Moshe had distanced himself from religion. Look at even Dode, the chosen one, the very son of God. He did not find Dode with his father and mother. They weren't hanging around with them. No, he walked away. He was not part of that community of Israelis that had become like Goyim in their veneration of Shaul as king. Nope, he was apart from all of that, hanging around in Bethlehem, tending sheep at 8 years old, all by himself. His father was a creep, his mother is unknown. So it's a pretty interesting instruction, isn't it? God followed through on it. He's consistent with it. When we first met, at least in this life, I had rejected religion and politics. It is a prerequisite. The second, God asks us to walk to Him so that He can perfect us. And I'm always cringe a little when I say this, perfect us. It's really more so that He can complete us, so that He can uh, remove, completely remove our guilt. And the way that He goes about doing that is He had His beloved son, Dode, fulfill matzah after Pesach, carrying our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again. And in that process of carrying our guilt into Sheol, we are completely clean from God's point of view and therefore totally innocent. And so God is asking us to allow Him to perfect us. Now, this is participatory. We must come to embrace not only this condition of the covenant, but also answer the invitation of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, where this takes place. And to do that knowledgeably, beneficially, we must know what Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim represent, how they were fulfilled, and how we go about capitalizing upon them. And for that knowledge, this 7-step path that Yahweh introduced for us to be part of His family, it was showcased in Mitzrayim with the first Passover causing the door to life to be opened. And the children of Israel, however, did not leave Mitzrayim, Egypt, on that day. No, they left on matzah, separating themselves from the imposition of religion and politics. And so we must understand how these 2 days work together. And we must appreciate the fact that in Rabbinic Judaism, they have completely eliminated matzah and they've turned Passover into a 7-day holiday. God's view is entirely different. From God's point of view, the celebration, the chag, is matzah. And Passover just happens to be the first day of chag matzah, with firstborn children being the third. So if you're going to be part of God's family, you need to walk to Him in a manner that enables Him to completely free you from your guilt. And this occurs during the celebration of Chag Matzah, which Dode, as the chosen one, as the Son of God, as our Messiah, fulfilled in His second of 3 lives when He took our guilt away from us and deposited it in Sheol, which is akin to a black hole, so that it is never seen again. Yahweh then asks us to totally trust and rely upon Him. Now, to do that, you have to know Him. You need to know what He is offering, what He expects in return. You have to know His name. You have to know His instructions. You must know His teaching, His guidance. And you must also let go of the other remedies that man has foisted in competition with God for human protection. It's actually for control, religion and politics. So rather than trusting your military, rather than trusting your government, rather than trusting your political party, rather than trusting your religion, you have to stop trusting them and trust and rely entirely on Yahweh, which can only be done once you know who He is and have an appreciation for what He is offering and asking in return. If you want to know those things, I would encourage you to go to yadayah.com and begin with the first book, An Introduction to God, and read through the 35 books that are presented there for your edification. The fourth condition of the covenant is to observe, closely examining, and carefully considering these very terms and conditions I'm sharing with you, and understand how they are integrated into the fulfillment of the Moed Mikra, of which there's seven: Pesach, Matzah, Bakodim, Shabua, which is upcoming, Teruah, which will be the first of the three celebrated in year 6000 Yah, just 7 years from now, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, where on Yom Kippurim, Yahweh returns with Dod, the Messiah and King, and on Sukkah, we re-enter the Garden of Eden and have 1,000 years to demonstrate that we can be trustworthy and reliable in God's sight. So this is the nature of those mitzvah, terms and conditions of the covenant. And lastly, Yahweh says, as a sign of the covenant, it's important that we as parents circumcise our sons on the 8th day, so we and they remember. And that is the sign of the covenant. God also will go as far as to say that if you're not circumcised, you cannot participate in Passover. If you can't participate in Passover, none of the rest of the Moed Mikra make any difference to you, because, well, that's the doorway that you begin. And unless you go through that doorway, there is no opportunity to benefit from matzah or Bakodim or Shabua, Teruah, or Kippurim or Sukkah. So you must begin at that place, and you cannot begin at that place if you are not circumcised. And for women that are wondering, well, what's my requirement? It's to raise your sons to be, and daughters to be, part of the covenant, to remember it by doing this. So here we are. Indeed, the terms and conditions of your covenant agreement, I completely trust and totally rely. They are verifiable and enduring, and I have shared them with you. You can read, there's 3 volumes of Yada Yahweh that are devoted to the covenant. And you welcome to read them, study them, benefit from them. They're at yadayah.com. They're all free. They're page turners, PDFs, and you can buy them royalty free at amazon.com, all available to you. This goes on to say, prior to the time that I responded and answered this invitation, before I was thoughtful and spoke truthfully and composed these songs, I was preoccupied and unintentionally erred. I inadequately wandered aimlessly, without deliberation and without the intent to mislead, and unwittingly deceived. And therefore, I placed my faith in mistaken options. Well, that may be just a bit of a softening of what he did, but we'll say, okay, we're glad that you recognize that before the intervention here, and that you were kind of read the riot act, if you will, before you were confronted very directly by someone with the knowledge of Yahweh and of what he was offering and expected in return, and who you, Dod, are in this regard. Before you fully responded to that invitation, Anah, well, you did more than unintentionally err, but it's all bygones now. We can learn from them. You recovered, and that's a very good thing. He goes on to say, but now at this point in time, literally keep my eyes focused upon, carefully observing, closely examining, and diligently exploring your word, your instructions, and your promise. Ra. That would be Mismore 119:66. You are good. You're Tob, generous, pleasing, enjoyable, and festive, beautiful, and pleasant to be around, Yahweh. Boy, that's a far cry from where he was in the 51st Mizmor, isn't it?
No, yeah.
Our son has grown up to be a man, and are doing what is good and beneficial by helping me learn, becoming better acquainted while teaching me how to properly respond to your clearly communicated prescriptions of what I should do to share life with you. 11967. Once again, it has become apparent to me, and we've been speaking of this in our upstairs library studio as we develop the last word picture, that most of the Mizmor that Dode wrote, he wrote late in his life, after he fell precipitously and was lifted back up by being taught clearly and unambiguously by a surrogate mother and father who shared with him exactly who he was, what he represents, what he would accomplish, and what Yahweh was trying to achieve with him, such that he changed his attitude. Prior to that time, Dode became Yisrael, repugnant, argumentative, blaming everyone but themselves, including God, and lashing out at God. And in fact, the 51st Mizmor, which conveys this, Dode did the same thing that Israel has done, erased God's name. Wouldn't even say it at the time. And so it is a metaphor for everything that that Israel had become. But as there was recovery for Dode, as you can hear in these words, so is there recovery for Israel. And as it would transpire, the same person who taught Dode what he needed to know to capitalize upon, to resolve his issue and to become better acquainted, taught to properly respond to God's clearly communicated prescriptions in life, is the same person who will lay down his life to resolve the same problem with the mortal remnant of Yisrael just 7 years from now. God starts with a plan, picks the characters in his story, and he sticks with them. The infamous, self-motivated, and presumptuous liars, they mislead. They deceive with their speeches, promoting worthless beliefs, smearing and slandering me with misinformation. These scribes conceal what I have said by plastering over me with their message. Well, there's 3 religions that are all based to either a tremendous extent, a great extent, or some extent on doing this very thing. The religion that was actually codified first among those 3 Abrahamic religions would be Christianity. You see, Judaism, as we know it today, didn't exist until Rabbi Akiba founded it in the 2nd century. Christianity was created by Paul in the 1st century, beginning with his letter to the Galatians. And it is Paul who claims that Dode, was dead and buried and therefore excluded from heaven. And as a result, that it was appropriate to steal all of the titles and accolades and achievements of Dode and slather them onto his caricature of Jesus Christ, someone who never actually existed. And so that is what he is speaking against. But rather than refuting that by citing things like Mizmor 119:68, to refute the new religion of Christianity and its misappropriation of Dode's titles and achievements, Rabbi Akiba foisted another false messiah on the Jewish people, fighting one lie with another lie, and caused the diaspora, caused the renaming of the land to be Philistia, creating the problem that they're fighting today twofold over. And so the father of Judaism became a great deceiver, trying to deceive to take attention away from Paul's deception. And in the end, it created this horrendous mess. And Arizna also mentioned Islam, is if it wasn't for the Talmud that the rabbis began to write and then share with Muhammad, Islam would not exist. Islam ultimately became a religion because Muhammad bought Talmud readings from rabbis twisted them to serve his situation, and created a religious veneer for the Quran that it would not otherwise have had. And so that is what is being said here, that the infamous, self-motivated, and presumptuous, they're liars. They mislead. They promote worthless beliefs, smearing and slandering me with misinformation. These scribes conceal what I have said, plastering over me with their message. This would not occur for another 1,000 years after Dode wrote this Mizmor. And so for him to know this, then the person who was teaching him about his special role with God told him what he was going to accomplish and how his people would twist what he achieved so that he could speak about it, and the Jewish people would be forewarned that this would occur. He is announcing the birth of Christianity and Judaism. I, with all my heart, intent, personal commitment, and sense of purpose, myself will engage to save, to protect, and to preserve, sparing by branching out while observing your precepts, these instructions which you have entrusted to us, encouraging us to pay close attention to and to examine for guidance so that we might respond appropriately to you. These are Natsar leading to Pakudim, Mizmor 119:69. Their hearts in judgment are calloused. Oh boy, isn't that the state of Israel? And shameful, ignorant, and irrational, irresponsive, and gross. That'd be true of everyone who is overtly political and religious. And many are both. Look at the MAGAs. Some are one. Look at the Marxists. Others are, various blends of these things. Some are Jews, some are not. But the fact is that Jews have become the most universally political and or religious people on earth. And as a result, their judgment is calloused, it's shameful, it's ignorant, it's irrational, unresponsive, and gross, similar to leopard tissue, both fat and scummy. I myself, he says, delight and show total enjoyment forever, anointed and bound to your teaching and guidance, your Torah. Mizmor 119:70. So Dode told us the truth boldly and without equivocation. So why would anyone in their right mind accept Paul's word over the Messiah's testimony? Wouldn't that be stupid? He just said that he is our Savior and that this result was enabled through the Torah, which is the opposite of what Paul claimed. While at the same time, the declared Son of God warned us about Shaul with no uncertain terms, as well as against Akiba. He went on in this same marvelous psalm, this Mizmor 119:71, to say, "It is good and beneficial for me that indeed you responded, providing your testimony and your answers, Anah, for the purpose of teaching me how to properly respond to your engraved and clearly communicated prescriptions of what I should do to be cut into this relationship." Choke. Yahweh and Dode were not on speaking terms from sometime around the moment where Dode was bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem and had a tizzy fit over how God intervened in the process and killed the man who tried to manipulate the picture that God was conveying of having the bull carry the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And so they begun a timeout. And Obed-Edom was inserted at that time to explain to Dode what he had missed. And unfortunately, he didn't listen initially. And it became worse because we go through that period and we find ourselves in 2 Samuel after passing through 2 Samuel 6 and 7, which are very interesting and also glorious stories, troublesome stories with a marvelous rendition and ending. We enter a troubled time, and that troubled time culminates in disaster, as is presented in 2 Samuel 11 and 12. That's the darkest moment in the whole human experience from God's point of view. And so after that, we have Daud's daughter being raped by his son, Daud's third son, Absalom, killing his firstborn over it. We have then Absalom usurping Daud's authority by making all manner of claims on his behalf and against his father. And then a coup that most Israel sided against Daud, and he was run out of town. And it's just a mess. And this was all precipitated by Daud becoming a terrible king, terrible father, terrible husband, terrible example, when he decided that he would covet another woman when he already had, well, at least 20 some odd, so that he had a different woman for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week, is where he was, and decided, I got to have one more. And that one was another man's wife, and he had that man killed. And then rather than own up to it, he doubled down and attacked God over it. Really despicable. And then it's when God re-engaged, not speaking directly to him. He was still speaking through Nathan. He judged him. He rebuked him via Nathan. God and Daud weren't speaking. For this to occur, Daud's inspired again. He's back communicating, at least in a spiritual level, with Yahweh. And that only occurred because of this intervention. And he is saying, I'm grateful, Yahweh, that you responded, providing your testimony and answers, Anah. And we're just now coming to an appreciation of how that occurred with the man who co-authored the 89th Mizmor with Yahweh, delivering it to him at this time. And so he provided the teaching on how to properly respond to God's engraved inscriptions for what we should do in life to live. The Torah, he concluded, its teaching, instruction, directed, and guidance of your mouth is better and more prosperous for me than thousands of gold and silver coins. Psalm 119, I shared with you 65 through 72. In that Daud, David, is speaking to, and on behalf of Yahweh and his Torah. His insights and perspective regarding both are relevant to this discussion, are they not? It is little wonder that Yahweh anointed him the Messiah and refers to him as his beloved son. In the 25th Psalm, we find him saying, and this is important too, the rebellious guilt of my youth. Well, yeah, I'll have to look up Nahum Rim, because when Daud did the dastardly deed, he stooped to the lowest point in his life. He was 56 years old. Now, is that a young man by the standards of he gets 3 lives, and he is now at the very least 3,000 years old? If he was first introduced to us 3,000 years ago, he's at least 3,000 years old. I can't tell you on that one, but I can tell you that he had a little issue with rebellion, just a touch of my youth. And rebellion, do not remember, as your love and mercy for me is recalled and memorialized. Well, let's just be clear here. At this point in time, God not only didn't forget, he memorialized it. It's there for all of us to read in um, Samuel, um, particularly the episode where he had a conniption fit over yes handling the moving of the Ark of the Covenant, uh, and then how God responded so negatively to him over the Bathsheba affair. So the details of all that is known. Dod's response in his letter that he had the light of Uriah carry to Joab so that he would be assassinated is gruesome. And then his ongoing vitriol against God in the 51st Mizmor is such that no, it's known. Now the question really is, since Dode not only manned up and he learned the lesson so that he rose after having stumbled, which is the key thing that God was interested in. God's not interested in us being perfect. That would be a waste of time. We'd have no interest to him. There would be no benefit for anyone if we were perfect. What God is interested in is us completing the job. And the job is to listen to him, to be thoughtful regarding what he says, to respond to him, and to see it through, not to give up, to show that we're dependable, we're reliable, particularly if we're mistaken, that we get when we learn something new, that we correct what we've said that is wrong and learn from it and move on, and we stumble and fall, we get back up and get going, wiser, stronger, and more experienced for it. So that is a lesson God wants us to know, and that's a lesson that his son, Dode, learned the hard way. So it's not to be forgotten, it's to be understood. Now, Yahweh, 2,000 years ago, arranged for Dode to carry his guilt and ours into Sheol together. And it was deposited there, never to be seen again from God's point of view. That doesn't mean that we don't know it. And how long we're going to know it, I don't know the answer to that. But I know that it's important for us to know it now, and God didn't hide it. Okay? So the rebellious guilt of my youth, the rebellion, do not remember, which is true if you're talking about God's perspective on it after he has carried it into Sheol. As your love and mercy for me is recalled and memorialized on account of your goodness and productive purpose, Yahweh. Well, Yahweh's productive purpose and goodness, Tob, carried out through Dode is the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim. The fact that Dode did these things, I'm convinced, is the single greatest discovery in human history. And right next to that is the realization of how Dode finally earned the trust of Yahweh such that God allowed his son to perform in this way. He says, this was 25:7 as the psalm reads, Yahweh, the Most High, is good and always right, completely correct, and consistently straightforward, Yashar. Therefore, he is the source of teaching and instruction, and he guides and directs Yara, the guilty, the Chata'ah, who have missed the way, with the way, Barha Derek. Mizmor 25:8. Yara is a rather key term here. Do you know why? It's the verbal root of Torah. That's why it means source of teaching and instruction, guidance and direction. Yara, according to Yahweh, probably knows since he inspired the Torah, told us explicitly that Yara is the actionable root of Torah. Now, since Yara means source of teaching, instruction, guidance, and direction, the Torah cannot be law. To present it as law is to be ignorant. It's to be irrational. It's to be stupid. It is to anger God. So anytime you hear in a religious text, a religious context, or even secular one, that the Torah is law. You know you're listening to somebody who's not only irritating God, but lying to all who are listening. Torah is based on Yara. Of that, there is no debate. He enables the way of the unpretentious and sincere who respond and actively engage. I wrote that translation 10, 12 years ago. I wouldn't render it that way. And by the way, that is something that is quite different in these programs and anybody else you're ever going to listen to. If you're listening to somebody who's preaching to you about God, they're reading the King James Version or the New Living Translation or the New American Standard Bible or the New International Version. They're reading from somebody else's really crappy, errant translation. I'm not. I did my own. And not only did my own, I share them with you. And I provide for you an amplified version of every word that I've translated. And I've corrected them all to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So if there's a difference in the Masoretic and the Dead Sea Scrolls, I share with you what the Dead Sea Scrolls says, correcting the Masoretic text. More than that, I scrub every single word of its religiosity by removing the diacritical markings and look what the letters themselves say. And when I'm given the opportunity, as I'm going to share with you right now with Anah, I go to the verbal root. Anah with a wah as the end is from the verbal root Anah. Anah with the hey as the end is one of the most important and repeated of all Hebrew verbs. It has a very simple meaning: answer, respond, reply. So this says that God enables the way of those who respond, of those who answer, of those who reply to him. Now, is there anything that's specifically important that you would respond to? Well, the previous thing was the verbal root of Torah, wasn't it? God's teaching and instruction. That's a good start. How about the fact that God has 7 annual invitations, mikra, in the plural mikre, for you to respond to and reply? When somebody gives you an invitation to a party, what do? Do you throw it away? Do you ignore it? Do you trash it? Or do you respond one way or the other? I'm going to attend. I'm not going to attend. These invitations, the 7 of them, Pesach, Matzah, B'Kurim, Shavua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah, they're invitations to meet with God. And yet, fewer than 1 in a million people answer them in accordance with God's invitation. And that's enough. God enables the way through his Torah guidance of those who respond to him. With this means to exercise good judgment to achieve justice by resolving disputes. I explained mitzvah momentarily. This is misfat. Misfat's not tough. It's just mitzvah and misfat are exceedingly easy words to render. Misfat is based upon shafat. And shafat is the Hebrew word to judge, to decide, to render a rational conclusion from the evidence. Mitzvah is from Sarah, which means to instruct. The addition of the M, either as a my or ma sound before shafat or Sarah, means I want you to ponder the implications. It's an interrogatory. And it says, you should ponder the implications. You should question. You should think about. You should want to know the answers pursuant to exercising good judgment, pursuant to the instructions and directions that God has provided. These are not religious terms. They're very specific, thoughtful things that you can process in your mind when you know what the words say. He provides the information to teach, lamad. God wants to teach us. Now, at least he wants to teach those who anah, respond to his way. There is this mythos that exists among a bunch of misguided people that if someone like Dode is speaking for God, it's because God did a data dump. He just gave him all the words. Every word that Dode said would be true. Perfect, true. Not the case. Not the case. Wasn't even the case with Moshe. It isn't the case with anybody. God does not do data dumps. He does learning. He does teaching. He gives us the information that we need to observe, to consider, and to engage with such that we can process it, come to know, come to understand, and then decide based upon the evidence. He teaches. And the process of teaching, and maybe some of you are either grown up in the Gen Z era, or you're so old like me. Well, I'm at least 5,000 years old, so I'm pretty old. I'm actually not kidding here. That you don't remember the process. So let me just explain it to you. You started in kindergarten, and then you went to first grade and second grade. And you may have ended with a college education or even graduate school. You may have written, like I have, 35 dissertations. But the fact of the matter is, you didn't study trigonometry in first grade. You didn't learn the rules of logic and rhetoric, well, at all if you're Gen Z, because they don't teach them anymore. But you would have learned them, a lifetime ago if you're, a seasoned citizen. But the fact is, you don't start there. You start with Dick and Jane, right? You don't start with Shakespeare. You don't start with something that is sophisticated and thought-provoking, because you don't have the capacity to process it. You have to have a foundation. You start in math with just knowing, recognizing the numbers, and then understanding the correlation between numbers, and then being able to add them. And then you learn how to subtract them. Then you learn how to multiply them. Then you learn how to divide them. And then you learn how to correlate various mathematical equations or shapes or concepts around them. You have to begin with a foundation. That's how teaching works. It's something that takes time. It's a disciplined process. You have to engage in it, or it does you no good whatsoever. And the only ones that God's teaching will benefit are those who are responsive. All of the mannerisms and conduct of Yahweh are merciful and beyond reproach, just said. They show favoritism, by the way, would be another word for that. And they are trustworthy and reliable. They're a myth, because God has integrity. For those who are preserved by Natsar, those saved by his family-oriented covenant relationship, his bereth. That would be a problem for the religious. In Judaism, first, there is no salvation in Judaism, but even when they feign it, is it ever based upon the bereth? Do they say, well, you've accepted the 5 conditions of the bereth, and you've done everything that God instructed, so therefore you're saved? Did they ever say that?
No.
Never. Is there anything in Christianity that says, well, salvation, according to the Psalms, this is a Mizmor, comes by way of the covenant relationship?
No. They never say anything about the covenant.
In fact, they do. They replace it.
Well,
Paul said in Galatians that the Torah's covenant was with Hagar, and therefore it enslaved, which is why he replaced it. So he says that the covenant condemns and enslaves, and that he came up with his own to replace God's, because he's smarter than God, I guess. Truth. Now, the salvation comes from the covenant. If you're not part of the covenant, you have no hope of salvation, and you can't be part of the covenant without meeting its 5 terms and conditions. I shared with you those terms and conditions. If you are religious, you are not part of the covenant, because the first condition, a prerequisite of the covenant, 5 fingers, but one's in opposition to the others. It is the prerequisite, the first of them. You must walk away from religion and politics, from the commingling of truth and lies that confound so many before you can even begin this process. You are only preserved, you're only saved, Natsar, if you are part of the covenant. Period. End of conversation. And you can't be part of the covenant without following each of those 5 edicts, and you can't follow them unless you understand them. I mean, how do you know that God is anti-religious unless you know his overall position? That God's number one theme, the single most common theme throughout the Torah and prophets, is not God saying, this is who I am and what I'm offering. It's God saying, this is not me. And if you are religious, you're upsetting me, you're distancing yourself from me. It's a condemnation of religion, is the number one theme. It's the number one theme throughout the Exodus. Number one theme in the Torah. Number one theme in the prophets. Right. First 10 chapters of Yeshaya, the great prophet, is all hammering and condemning religion and politics. All of it. So you can't be part of the covenant while you're religious and political. That's why I speak out so vehemently against religion and politics. It is impossible for you to be saved without being part of the covenant. And if you are part of the covenant, you have disassociated from religion and politics. You can't even sniff it until you do, which is why we have to condemn it. And the next 2 terms of the covenant require you to walk to God along the path that he has provided to totally remove your religious and political corruption, your guilt, and to trust God in this process. So, until you have done that, become observant regarding these conditions. You can't be covenant, and until you're covenant, you can't be saved. Simple. So all the mannerisms and conduct of Yahweh are merciful and beyond reproach, and they are trustworthy and reliable for those who are preserved by his covenant and his enduring witness and restoring testimony, Edah.
Pretty straightforward.
Absolutely straightforward. God's only merciful. He is only loving. He only shows favoritism for those who trust his presentation of and are preserved and saved by his Bereth covenant. Period. He doesn't love everybody. He's not merciful to everybody. He is only merciful to those who trust and rely upon the conditions of and the benefits of the Bereth, as they are reliably and dependably presented in the Torah, and by his enduring and restoring witness and testimony. Do you know that God designates 2 restoring witnesses to convey his eternal testimony? And while you don't have to know who they are to benefit from his covenant, you would be hugely benefited if you do, because God has provided well over 1,000 evidences of who they are, exactly who they are. And the reason he does this is because God's very clear. When Miriam, Moshe's sister, came up to him with Aaron and say, "We too speak for God." First of all, we dislike your wife, and now we've been spreading all sorts of lies about her, by the way. And as a result, we too speak for God. So God intervened at that point, and he says, "No, you don't. When somebody speaks for me like Moshe, there's a reason that I've chosen them. And the reason for Moshe was, nah, he was responsive. But what he says is, they know it and you know it. I make it absolutely clear. God has made it absolutely clear who his Ida are. And the reason he makes that clear is if he's speaking through someone, you ought to listen. You ought not speak over them. You ought not condemn them. You ought not criticize them. You ought to listen. He makes that exceedingly clear. You ought to look up, try to figure out who the Nakar is. Sometimes it's presented as Nakri, which would mean my Nakar. It's an observant foreigner. Who the Chodar is means a branch from the fallen tree that once represented Israel. You ought to figure out who these people are. You know, Christianity is a religion that grew out of a non-prophecy. There is no prophecy of a returning Messiah. None. It's the same thing with Judaism. It doesn't exist. God acknowledged who his Messiah is. His Messiah spoke to us and told us what he was going to achieve. In fact, I happened to have been there at the time, 555 BCE. We went into Babylon to speak to Daniel, who was a real jerk, but he was at least literate, and so he would write it down. He was Gabriel, I was Michael, one who is right about God, one who is courageous and capable as God's man. We were there. We said exactly what was going to happen. We did not tell you to hang around looking for a returning Messiah. We told you the exact date that Chag Matzah would be fulfilled in 33 CE, the exact moment in year 4000 Yah, and then what would happen after that, and what would happen before that, and what the purpose was. But you weren't listening. What there is, however, is copious prophetic presentations about the arrival beginning in the Torah itself about the Nakar. And rather than just a single one line, by the way, it's not even recalled in the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one line in Daniel, there's a whole chapter of Debatim on the Nakar. It's the culmination of the speech, which is the real Sermon on the Mount that Solomon gave at the commencement of the house for Yahweh's name on Teruah about the Nakar. And he goes as far as to say, when he arrives in the last days, you better listen to what he has to say because it's your only hope for salvation. When there's an entire chapter of Yeshaya, the great prophet, the 11th, devoted entirely to the Chodar. When there is a mashal, a proverb, devoted in its entirely to the Chodar, and that person's arrival and what they will say and what they will write and how God inspired them, and no one's looking for him? What's wrong with you? Why is your head up your tuchus? God speaks of bringing back his Ida. You don't even know who they are. You don't know when they're going to arrive. You don't know what they're going to say. Why? Because you're not listening. Why? Because you're not part of this covenant. Why? Because you're not responsive. You don't even know Yahweh's name. Oh, that isn't true of the family that has gathered around these words, who has read these books, who's gone to yadayah.com and read through most or all of them, and who listens to these thousands of hours of programming and teaching. But it is for all but 1 in a million. It's true. As a result of your name, Yahweh, that is not your name, Lord. It's not your name, God. It's not your name, Hashem. It's not your name, Jesus. It ain't your name, Allah. As a result of your name, your Shem, Yahweh. What's so hard about that? Why did Christians and Jews and Muslims feel at liberty to write Yahweh's name out of their religious texts? What gives them the nerve to do that? It says, as a result of your name, Yahweh. You want to be part of the covenant? You want to be responsive to Yahweh's instructions? As a result of your name, Yahweh, you will genuinely choose to completely forgive, Shalah, my rebellious guilt, which is great. Boy, was it ever. It is only as a result of Yahweh's name that salvation occurs. Otherwise, we die with our guilt and our soul dissipates into nothingness unless you were amongst those that decided that you would take it upon yourself to promote your religious or political ideals. And then you can spend an eternity in Sheol, separated from the rest of us in that black hole. Hey, you'll get to find our guilt. It's there. It won't do you any good, but it's there along with your soul forevermore. It's Yahweh's name. Now, you have to know more than Yahweh's name, but that's a start. If you don't know Yahweh's name, you haven't even started. Hence, whatever individual respects and reveres Yahweh, he will teach and guide him in the way he should choose. We have free will. We do. However, God's not going to approach, to teach, or to guide anyone who does not start with a respect and reverence for Yahweh's name. And if you're one of those people that we don't know how to pronounce it, it's sacrilegious to say it, you're pronouncing it wrong. What gives you the right to say it's be pronounced this way versus some other way? I didn't have my head up my tuchus. I read what God said. Yahweh, when he approached Moshe, told him first and foremost that his name was based on the verb haya. There are 4 letters in Yahweh's name, 2 of which are repeated. And of those 3 letters, 2 of them are in haya. Haya is a verb. It means exist, was, is, will be. It was written in first person, I am, I was, I am, I will be. It was written around my favorite of all Hebrew words, Asher, for the benefit of the relationship, to show the way to get the most out of life, Asher. It's Ehaya, Asher, Ehaya. So with Haya, you know how to pronounce the Yod and the Hey, don't you?
Yep.
No question about it.
No question.
What book did Yahweh reveal his name to Moshe in?
In the beginning.
In the Torah.
In the Torah.
How do we pronounce, where do we get the O sound in Torah?
That would be the Wa.
The Wa. That's the only letter that's not in Haya. It's the Wa. Look at Torah. Do you think that nobody knows how to pronounce Torah? Or are you just fooled by the religious because they take the Wa out of it and write it as if it doesn't have a Wa? I'm here to tell you that Yahweh spelled Torah 100% of the time with a Wa. And that's how you get the O sound. And if you don't like that one, what about how do Jews greet themselves? How are they? Yeah, and how long have they said that? Thousands of years. Shalom. Where do you think the O sound comes from in shalom?
Wa.
The Wa. So, with shalom, with Torah, and with, by the way, with about 1,000 other Hebrew words, and with Haya, and with about 1,000 other Hebrew words, the pronunciation of Yahweh is straightforward. It is irrefutable. The Yod, the He, and the Wa are all vowels. All of them. There are 5 vowels and 17 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet. We even get the word alphabet from the first 2 letters in the Hebrew alphabet, Aleph and Be'eth. It isn't difficult. The reason it isn't known is because the religious don't want it known. Because if it is known, Christianity evaporates. Because God's name isn't Jesus. It isn't Christ. It isn't Lord. And Judaism goes bye-bye because God's name isn't Hashem. It's not G-D. It's not Lord. It's Yahweh. And that means they lied about the most fundamental of all truths. And so the rabbis can't be trusted. And of course, Islam goes poop for 1,000 other reasons, but God's name's not Allah, it's Yahweh. Hence, whatever individual respects and reveres Yahweh, Yahweh will teach him and guide him in the way he should choose. Bashar. Bashar is Yahweh uses it to describe Dod as his chosen one. Bashar expresses free will. You have a choice. You can respect and revere Yahweh, and he will teach you, or you can choose not to. And once you are receptive to Yahweh's individual teaching based upon recognizing and respecting and revering Yahweh's name, then you can choose whether or not you want to accept his way or not. God's got a way. Pesach, Matzah, B'Kurim, Shavua, Teruah, Purim, and Sukkah. He has a way. He has a covenant. He has a Torah. He ain't changing any of it for you. You can either accept his way or go bye-bye. Choice is yours. But you don't have the choice to do what Paul did, which is to condemn God's way and to replace it. You don't have a choice to do what Rabbi Akiba did, which is the exact same thing. You don't have the choice to do what Muhammad did. Oh, you got the choice, all right. But you have the consequence, which is an eternity in hell, Sheol. Or you can simply choose Yahweh's way once you come to respect and revere his name, and you have capitalized on the teaching and guidance he has provided. What do you think is the verb that was used here to address teaching and guidance? Would it be that Yara word again?
Yep.
Just maybe? It is. So therefore, Torah, which is based upon Yara, couldn't be law, could it?
No.
How many Hebrew words are there for obey if there was a law?
None.
None would be the answer. When you see obey and your Bible translation, they're corrupting the meaning of Shama, which means to listen. His soul, in the most favorable, pleasing, and festive circumstances, will dwell and endure, and his descendants will inherit the realm. Mizmor 25:13. So, what matters, your body or your soul?
Your soul.
That's all that matters. God's never going to save your body. If you really love your body, you're in trouble because it's never going to be saved. God can't do anything with you while you have a body. He can equip and teach your soul so that your soul can be transformed into radiant energy and light and be empowered and enriched and enabled in that way. But your body is meaningless. It's your soul is the only thing that counts. So your soul, in the most favorable, pleasing, and festive circumstances, that's that word Tob again. You know, it's not hard to come to understand the words when you know what the word means. Nefesh batob, soul in favorable circumstances, will dwell and endure, Lynn. And his descendants, his seed, his Zerah, will inherit. Yarash means to inherit. Eretz, the realm. Material realm, the world, the earth. Now, this is interesting because what God has to say here is that we're coming full circle. Eden, the Gan Eden, was a microcosm of the planet Earth, which is a protective enclosure conducive to life. And when God caused the fall of man so that we would then have the opportunity to demonstrate that we could be trusted, that we would listen to him, respond to him, and then become reliable with him, that God is reopening Eden. He's going to get rid of all the religious and all the political and all the militaristic and all the conspiratorial and all the anti-Semite. Going to get rid of all of it. And then he is going to allow us back into Eden, have 1,000 years where all of those who have not already become covenant have the opportunity to inherit the entire earth. The entire planet is going to be depopulated by a lot. It's only about 1 in a million people that are going to avail themselves of this. And then during that time, we have the opportunity to teach you how to respond properly to God. and you're going to inherit the realm, the material realm. And ultimately, we inherit all of the material realm, which would be the entire universe, all 6 dimensions of it. A very close and intimate fellowship with Yahweh is certain for those who respect and revere his covenant. And he makes known to him, Yada. So, God is offering a close and intimate relationship. And it is certain for those who revere and respect Yahweh, such that you listen to what he has to say. If you respect him, you're going to listen to what he has to say. If you respect him, you're going to respect his name. If you respect him, you're going to closely examine and carefully consider his Torah instructions and the insights that he has provided through his prophets, and you're going to respond accordingly. That's what's going to happen. And if you do those things, it's going to lead you directly to his covenant, Bereth, where you become part of his family. All things that Yahweh makes known via Yada. Yada, yada, yada. That is God's messenger at the moment. Mizmor Psalm 25, and I shared all the way through 14. We have lots more to consider, and we will in our next program. I love sharing the word of our God. I love sharing Yahweh's name. I love anytime there is an expression of the importance of the Bereth, the covenant relationship that God has established for us and has invited us to participate in. Anytime there is a discussion on Torah, God's instructions and guidance, we are all in and enthusiastic. So while this is Appalling Twistianity, sometimes what we do is we go to the very word of God so we can show the difference between God's teaching and guidance and Paul's religious rubbish. So I hope you enjoyed today's program. I thank you for listening.